to start running.
And they don't want to out of the tent. Brilliant.
Brilliant.
Right, welcome back, everybody. We are going to kick straight into the community board priorities, which the champions will present. So first up, I'm guessing.
Yes, I'm still wanting to take.
Absolutely.
Yeah. A really good conversation with the Cromwell community board just yesterday. We had delayed that workshop. Really good conversation around the priorities that Cheryl and Sarah are present for. And there is quite a clear work program in Cromwell. So these priorities are probably proposed around this board. They're really keen to realise the benefit in the whole and really make the true community asset as a wider place that is a return on investment. So that's a real key focus of the board. They have heard from members of the community that the cemetery in Cromwell is really a bit hardy, probably not fit to do this, so that the board really want to see some work done on the cemetery, and David and his team have come across that. So that's a key focus for them. Town centre has been discussed with the council. A bit of a focus on the safety upgrades and really starting to build that picture for further conversation to consider. So I'll work with the board over the next 2 years in the lead up to the next LTP on that. They had a really good conversation around land strategy and the land sales. That piece of work around the endowment land strategy is obviously getting that strategy done. And then obviously the implementation of that strategy. They really the sort of the big ticket items for them. And obviously the land strategy, of course, that goes with the development and industrial development today. Cheryl and Sarah, have I missed anything there?
They're off. Cemetery was big, and one wasn't it?
I just had a quick question on the cemetery for the Cromwell people because I wasn't at the last one. That plan that was done that had the
Crematorium. That's an older.
yeah, we need another crematorium.
No, well, they're not actually pushing that. They were just.
Okay. It was just an idea.
No, that's the it's the boat. I mean, there were some pretty good slides that they showed us a couple of meetings ago, and it's some pretty poor here.
So yeah, the cemetery itself, yeah, totally understand that. No, just the building stuff. I wondered if that was.
No, that's the plan that council had done a while ago, and they're saying they don't necessarily think that we need to go that far. Have a look.
In 2018, as part of the previous LTP, there was a lot of friends of Cromwell group and another group that obviously comes to do this. That's what they plan.
That's what that plan.
That group sees in this other one's now.
And this one just wants some.
And this one's really
sprucing and less rabbits and. Yeah, general tidying and maintenance stuff.
On the plan. Thank you. Dip bonfire, tree. Can't take any tree.
I sort of tidy up if the cemetery was a given.
It's pretty dire.
And they are looking at with the council, they do some of the labour.
They've been really close to them.
Yeah.
A group together that's there saying, you know, help.
Probably a bit like the drive.
Give it
Out our way there, we've got friends, so.
We don't want to do, we'll just.
and try and get some funding to assist with what the council can do, but they want us to support it. That's good.
Should we go, Vincent?
Yeah.
So John Park, which is just up over here, it's currently under a QE2 covenant, and the trust is certain financial funds essentially, and so they're looking to have council that like council looking to investing that into our operating, which is just obviously the half milers. The direction that we had from Vincent was to have a bit of look at it, but understand the pest costs. There's a lot of wild pines and things like that up there. So that's one thing that we're looking through. Clyde Museum, just I guess different scenarios, and there'll be a discussion around property and what that looks like going forward as well. Water, obviously there's some interesting through with Umico, and just the general cost of water. They acknowledge that there's going to be some fairly high charges coming through here. And the Umico hub as well. Just one of the things that we spoke about after the workshop was around the appetite of helping cover Just rough numbers, it's around about a $5 million project right now. There's funding for probably about 3 to 3.4 million of that, and a shortfall of about 1.6. And so we'll formalise that back through the BCB as wanting to support that as part of the LTP, but that was something that I'd like to ask the community in here as well.
Just on that, sorry, that will come up later today, and it would be good to get some direction again.
Just looking at, I guess, strategies for libraries and museums as the district continues to grow. Obviously, we're using central stories and stuff now, but looking for the both to maybe unite over the next 10 years, a bit of a longer term thing for us to look at in a conversation with the community. A dog park, there's suggestions sort of around Linda and Diane, some fencing there. The outdoor pool, is it used enough? And we'll talk a little bit about that just a little bit later on today, and just test with the community. That facility has been operating for 20 years now, so I guess just asking the community if they still want it. On a new stadium, there's some work that's going to be undertaken there, but also looking at mobility access up into Ollie Stadium. There was bit of interest in that, and working with the rugby club to see if we can have some kind of ramp going up or something to that effect. And then just general conversation around growth, infrastructure, and then a little bit around sort of tourism, economic development, and I guess the benefits that it's achieving, and making sure we're communicating that to the wider community as well. Covered, I guess, the museum stuff I've already covered. There was some good discussions around the importance of museums in the BCB. And I think that's all I've got. Is there anything that I've missed, Martin, or?
I think the big one was infrastructure as far as wastewater and currently, Judy will be talking to us again later on today about that. But yeah, the concerns that the lack of infrastructure is having on the potential for growth.
Yeah.
Agree with it. But this morning, someone moved here. So,
Yeah, big summary.
yeah.
Okay, we'll go to DBX, and Sally, feel free to jump in.
Great.
So, over the past couple of years, TBX had a few things that bounced around with no real clear, let's get this nailed. So things like King George Park and what upgrades could happen there. They're having a conversation with the roading team around curbing and footpathing, but of course both of those things are primarily NZTA or funds from NZTA support, which essentially hasn't come through in this last round. So the conversation's still live with QP and his team, but I think it's a challenge there. Often conversations around rubbish bins and just managing people as they come through Roxburgh as well. But what really came out of the board meeting when we caught up with them and around what is a priority for this, what do you want to be focusing on, was the development of a master plan for the Teviot Valley. So they could actually line up what it is over a longer period of time that the Teviot Valley should be looking at investing in. What investment is public, so the ratepayers or the taxpayer, what investment might come from the private sector, how may they attract that investment from the private sector, how might they best leverage opportunities out of things like the cycle trail connection when that gets money, how does that actually come to fruition and how does the Teviot Valley best do that. And same point is just made with Vincent there around does the infrastructure support the growth of the community? It's been one have been raised. So they want to capture these things in a master plan, longer term view of the Tiwi Valley. Could be aiming for. There is a couple of pieces of work that are underway already, which will help inform that. So there's the spatial plan, which will be signing very shortly, signing off. Okay. And there's the Rosswood community plan that will begin work in 2025. So those pieces will feed into a master plan, but there's a view that there should be a master plan that kind of incorporates that information, but also looks beyond.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. And then it gives groups the ability to then pick up pieces of that plan going forward. So it may be that a particular group wants to do the enhancement of King George Park, for example, and so then they can see, the whole community can see what our vision is, as well as an upgrade to probably the main street as well, business area as well. Yeah, and yeah, the infrastructure piece is quite important, I think, in supporting growth. We don't want to be forgotten about. Yeah.
Thanks, Phil.
Yep.
QB.
MCB. Being around the priorities, we looked back to the resident opinion survey as well for the slide, just around what sort of, well, it was probably a low response rate. It's been consistent for the last 2 years. The top three being West Supply, unsealed roads and sealed roads, around that sort of four services. And so the MCB talked through the importance of those, the importance of the water supply and wastewater, which are both the other boards have mentioned as well. I'll come up with that, just around the security of those supplies and the availability of water on that wastewater treatment as well. Talked a little bit around just the unsealed road piece and the importance of some of the revetment program coming to the Manutoro in the next few years, which is the planning road program in the road space, but just noted the importance of that for the renewal of some of those roads. Talked about the pool, ongoing maintenance of the pool, the hours of the pool, which I know David's been looking closely at that on, and the staffing of that, and just trying to get as long a season as they can out of it. And he started talking about potentially looking forward to what the renewal of that asset looks like in the future as well, and wanting to maybe some of this long-term plan, but start thinking about what that's going to look like in the future, and how that all works in the council on that. Talked about the turf at the school, which the board has talked about a $200,000 contribution for that, and the best way to do that, and their priority, and that's one of their largest priorities, is making that space. And I know staff here will look back in today as well for and David around the council considering council versus board contribution to that tariff. And then I know the team's been working around the 1 year versus 2 year impact of rates for that ward. They were to look at the grant for that, and then looking at potential asking for support from councils as part of that. So the team will look back in that later today. And then the other piece was just around the development of the services that are available in those small towns, the service centre, different things like that, and the importance of that to that community. But yeah, that was it for each.
Amazing. Thanks. Questions? Anyone? Brilliant. Thank you very much. Oh, welcome.
Still going.
Still welcome. Come and spread some something.
So I'm just going to give a quick, thanks, one, a quick budget update, apart from the one I've already given you, but I've got a five-page slide. Next slide, please. Just to set the context, we've undertaken a significant amount of work to calculate this number for your consideration. There have been some significant challenges in terms of the model that we're using. We've changed the overhead allocation and we went live with a software upgrade that hasn't been as friendly to us as possible. So I think we've done well to get something to you today. That will be refined as we go through and review the budget. So, to the next page, please. Right, so the estimated rates rise, which is what everybody's kind of interested in at the moment. It's currently sitting at 20% plus-ish, and I say ish because we've still got some work to refine that. That 20% includes things like the operating reserve repayments. Now, that is obviously up for discussion in terms of how that happens and what period of time that may happen over. I have taken a financial prudence approach, and because it's an operating reserve, it should be repaid as quickly as possible, but that is not, it's can be changed from direction from council. BAU, so excluding those types of things, the rates at 13.23%. Following rate rises in the following years is also significant, and I've got a little table at the back of this. The year after, so year 2 of the LTP, we're looking at 14.5%. So I think it's important to look at rates rising across the period rather than just what's going to happen next year. So we've put in the next 10 years, and I probably would suggest that you look at probably the next 3 years, because we're running into a new LTP cycle, etc. And things change over that time, but you need to be looking at a longer view for your rates. This model does include debt repayment, so we have started to repay debt. My understanding was that last year we pushed that out. We've now put that back in. Given that our debt levels are starting to increase, we need to be paying our debt down as we go. It does not include, so the BAU does not include covering the operating deficits, and I estimate that to be between 4 and 6%. That's what I was talking about at the beginning. It does not, BAU does not include replenishing of the Roading Emergency Reserve Fund. My understanding is that that's currently sitting in a deficit of $500,000, and there's going to be a paper coming to council to draw another $500,000 down to pay for the most recent emergency works that affected the council space. So we need to be getting ourselves into a place where we're actually replenishing that and having some funds available for those types of events. Interestingly, my understanding is that the 1 in 10 year events tends to be occurring every year now. So we need to start thinking about how those things are coming. And it does not include the use of the building reserve to offset rates in the building control space. Given that we are looking at ramping up the costs in the building control space to keep up with demand, I'm thinking this is going to be a bit of a zero-sum game in terms of the use of the reserve. So we haven't, it may bring the rates down a little bit, but at the moment we're just saying it nets out increased cost versus the use of the slide. Thanks. So the way forward, and I might have doubled up a couple of statements in here, but one of the things that council should determine is the level of rates that it's comfortable with. What does that number look like? Bear in mind that for every $524,000, that equates to a 1% rate swing. And this will be impacted by the decisions as to the increase in rates that is acceptable. So obviously, if you say 14% is too high, 13.23 is too high, and another number is acceptable, you have to multiply the difference between $524,000 to come up with the savings that you need to make to achieve the rate line you want to achieve. And then you've got to decide what you're prepared to engage with the ratepayers over. Having just come off of an 18% average, what number is the number that you want to go out and engage with the ratepayers again. So those are the types of conversations you need to have. And there will be some non-negotiables in that number, such as debt repayment. We've got to get and keep that in and start repaying the debt. And I'd suggest reserve replenishment at whatever level you choose to put it in, making the commitment to put it in helps into future years. So at whatever levels that might be. Next slide one, please. So this is difficult to read. Can we make that figure or not?
We could print it off.
We will print for the conversation we're going to have into the future. The first table gives us the rates required by activity. So for argument's sake, the first one, community economic development, community economic strategic development. Next year we're budgeting 3.7 million. The year after we're budgeting 3.8, and so on. And that will give you the rates rises per activity. If we can. We'll see that as well a little bit. There you go. So clear. So thanks, Wayne. Hopefully that's a little bit easier. So we're looking at a $59.4 million rates requirement at the moment. For 25-26 and then onwards, it's 68, 72, so on and so on. If you go to the next bit down, which is the rates percentage increase, that make up the 13.23 in year one, you'll see things like community economic and strategic development is of the 13.23, they are 0.22. Environmental services are 1.62 of that 13. And as you go, you'll see governance and corporate services are minus 1.75. That's because we have changed the way we are funding some of our activities. So risk and procurement used to be funded as an overhead. As a rates line. It's now going through the overhead area. So that's a one-off. And if you look in year two, you can see it's 0.11 of the increase of 14.54. All the way through property and community facilities is 2.12. That will include the initial costs associated with the Cromwell Memorial Hall in year one. And then you can see in year two, it's about 2% of the rate going forward. So that looks about right. Coming down to the last four, which is your infrastructure activities, you can see Three Waters, 4.5, so 2, so 6.5, 7.5, maybe 7 and 8% of that 13 relates to Three Waters, and transport is 2.37. So and you can see in the following years how that plays out with all of the activities that we have. So given the last part of that table, if you just scroll down one, I've calculated the 13.23% in each change as a percentage out of 100%. So you can see, if you look at the waters, that's 56 odd percent relates to Three Waters, and then if you add transport onto that, you're talking 70 odd percent in infrastructure costs in terms of our rate rises. Property and community facilities, you can see at 16.05%. Environmental services 12.24. So you can see the big players in this table. What this actually kind of shows is because of the large chunk that relates to infrastructure and Three Waters specifically, we're talking over 50% per year in most cases. As it starts to ramp up, a standalone work within council, model may not stack up as we start to, I guess, as we start to, become more of a water entity and not being able to do anything else with our rates starting to go from 50 to 60 to 70. We start to constrain ourselves if we want to keep the rates down, I guess is what I'm saying. Whereas if I'm not saying that, someone's got to pay for it, whether it's a CCO, whether it's in-house. But for us to do other things, there's a risk that we become a water entity with a borrowing and rates levels, because obviously the borrowing goes up, we have to fund all that as well. So that's the briefest of overviews.
Can I ask why 1.69% in year four for community facilities in comparison to the and then a -50 in year 6? How do we go, and can that not be normalised across the
Look,
years?
yeah, there's still some work to do on that. This is the raw, this is what it come out at. There will be some smoothing that we could possibly do. But again, it comes back to the levels that you're prepared to accept. If you're prepared to, if you want 10% for argument's sake, and we can possibly move stuff into future years, but it's going into like years 3 and 4 and beyond that. You've then got another LTP cycle as well. But it's kind of, is it justified that it needs to be done now? And if it's justified that it needs to be done now, it needs to be done now type of thing. Is that?
That bottom table is only as a percentage of the rise.
Yeah, I understand that, so it's still
The
correlates.
other stuff's cheaper, so.
Correlates up the top too.
But they're quite little numbers, aren't they? Property and community goes, it's little moving forward. This means the rise overall is less because you've gone from 30 to 6. So that figure is more significant than a 6% rise and isn't a 30% rise, isn't it?
Well, if you look at,
1.65, 0.9,
if you look at something like environmental services for argument's sake, that's 1.62% of that. So that's an increase in cost of $1.5 million. Because 1%, sorry, not 1.5 million, more than that. It's just under 750,000 roughly. So that means that for every 1% increase, 524,000 has been added to the cost, which means the rates have gone up. Environmental services in year 2, that's an increase. It's still an increase of another $500,000 on what we had the previous year. Year 3, 0.2, I would say that's probably an aberration. It would be a break even, so they're not adding any more costs. So what they may have been in that particular case is we've added more staff to do cope with the demand that we do. And then it kind of sits at 0.46, 0.38, and that could be just an inflation component to that, because these numbers are inflated as well.
Because I guess from a community perspective, the ups and downs are the bits that actually hurts them the most. If they knew,
Yeah.
From a budgeting, personal or whatever, in order, the big fluctuations are where you, and the ones that they're not expecting, are the ones that really want to hurt.
Yeah, and that is a conversation that we need to have as to what can be pushed out into the future to smooth that out. We haven't had a chance to think about that yet. Given the stuff that's coming through, and again, I'll come back to my original comment, if we put it in there, especially in the infrastructure space, that I know Julie and her team have worked really hard to trim, push and move stuff around so it's not as big an impact. We've kind of landed on this. Whether there's much more that we can do in that space, we'll go back and have a look at that. But this is after that type of massaging of the numbers to see what we can do. Looking at these numbers here, it's still 13% next year, potentially 14.5% the year after. So 2 years we've had 30%, and then we've got another 6%. So it's still increasing. Yeah.
We've got We're running out of time. I'm running a tight ship. We've got about 1 minute. Paul is back, I think 3 more times today to talk about other things. In this context, is there an appetite in recognising that people before us have plucked 5% out of thin air and gone, we're not going to do rates rises more than 5%, and here we are looking at ballpark 20% yet again. Do we want to say to the team, we want you to go away and come back with something that doesn't look above 10 or something that doesn't look above 14, or do we want to say we want you to do everything you can and come back to us and tell us what the cost of doing this business is, and then that's what we take to the community, and then we ask them what they don't want.
So the most obvious thing we can do right now is get a view around your debt repayment of the deficit accounts. At the moment, Paul's, from an accounting point of view, is saying we should pay them off quickly. That goes from 14 plus 6% to 20. If you said, I don't know, we worked on a scenario, paid off over 10 years loan funding, that would be 2% on where we landed on rates. So it's just giving an idea of what your thoughts around those sorts of things are.
That you say
That it means we go from 52 to 59 million, so that's about 7 million increase in rates.
so we wanted to bring the rates down to around 6%. We've just got to say.
We're just going to cut 4 mil off the budget pretty much.
Yeah, and the way I look at that is you're talking, so come back to 6, so you're dropping at 7, just round numbers, 7.5 to 35, that's
$3.5 million.
that's 3.5 million you've got to cut off the budget.
So what if you just spread that out over the whole thing? Right, so
Well,
Recognising too that 70% of that is roughly infrastructure costs.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's-
So, and there's very limited ability to
Do much with that.
shave some of our things, so you would potentially you couldn't spread it evenly over the different departments. It would be some that would be taking a bigger hit because there's some things that we have to do legislatively.
And some things, if we didn't do, could stymie growth as well, right? So if we don't do our 3 water stuff, then we might not be able to also.
So is there an appetite to start paying back some of our deficits and spread it over a long time, or pay it back all at once?
Long time.
Well, hang on, no. It depends what the debt's been raised for. If it's infrastructure which has got a lifespan of 30 years, then it's over 30 years with intergenerational cost of that. If it's short-term debt, then it needs to be dealt with quickly.
These are operational.
So,
This is operational debt.
Operational debt, the likes of, as Paul said, that emergency fund that we put money into for emergency roading repairs, which is now in a deficit and will be further in a deficit. There's operational costs that have blown out that we're going to have to start paying back. I think there's an appetite to pay them back, and we'd like to spread that cost just as a start off for Paul to go away and start punching numbers. Yeah, great.
just from a mathematical, the last thing, the mathematical side of if you push stuff out this year into future years, that increases the rate rise the following year. So that's why I've opened the conversation with, please look at your rates over a long term. So if we're talking 14.5 in year 2, that's 14.5 on 13.23. So if you drop to 13.23, that means 14.254 becomes 25 or something bigger because it's coming off a lower base.
Yeah.
So if you're talking pushing stuff around, you've got to look at price per ton.
Does the 14 include 6% coolers? No.
No.
It won't, because that will only have in terms of a rate rise, it will only have a year 1 impact because that will go to 20. Right, year 1, we had 6 million in year 1, we had another 6 million years. Oh, sorry, it's 3 million. 3 million in year 1. You're adding the same in year 2 and the same in year 3. So the rate rise from year 1 to year 2 will still be 14% from a mathematical perspective.
Great. Sorry, just Sally, and then we need to move on.
Question. But could we could we make it more like 10, 10, 10, 10? You know, over, so instead of 13, 14, 6, 6, 6, could it be more like 10, 10, 10?
That would be a decision that you as council would say, and you just give us direction to say, we want 10% over the next 5 years, and then it might, whatever, drop to 6% over the following 5. That would be something, if you made that decision, we would go and fit the budgets to match that 10%. So it might not be, it's not as easy as it sounds, because then we're going to be talking about the large component, which is the infrastructure stuff, and how do we push that around. So yeah, there's it'd be a lot, there's still some work to do on it, but I guess it's more of a, what are you interested in seeing? If 13.5 is, or 13.2 is too high, what's a number that's not? I mean, that's a conversation then that we're anything.
And just the other thing is the 13%, because it's waters and it's urban, that means it's not 13% for our urban people. It's more than that. Yeah, so that's quite a concern.
Yes, we'll have more questions, I'm sure, when you return to the table, Paul. Thank you.
I think we've talked about spreading the deficits, but
We'll have a look at 10 years perhaps and see how those.
yes, conversations.
Welcome, Julie.
Hi. So I've got Tom Lucas with me, I'm mentioning that because Tom's actually going to, Paul doesn't have information to be a document for us, election document. So, Cupid's obviously here with Broden's power. So I will run through this reasonably quickly because a lot of people will have seen the board, just about the refresh, some of it, so, you know, obviously you've had a few false starts on this, to be fair. So this was in 2021, we did a whole lot of discovery around what changes, what influences our programs, then we shaped up into some sort of a structure, and then we need to do some prioritisation, and then we need to deliver the strategy. To be fair, in 2021, we didn't really need to do a lot of prioritisation because we were looking at what we were doing and prioritising certainly the bigger part of the strategy. Next slide, mate. So just to give you some clarity around some of the things we had to do simply because legally we were required to do it, and that tends to drive what an infrastructure strategy has to look like. So the Act requires us to define how we will manage our renewals, our levels of service and growth needs. So when you hear me talking, I'm talking community because I keep splitting everything up into level of service, growth, renewal. That's because it's really important from a legal aspect. It's important from our development contributions, and it influences where the funding comes from to do that work. So the renewals should be largely being funded by our depreciation, our levels of service. A lot of councils will use these for that growth. We're trying to cover by contributions, but some of these things will go into deficits sometimes, and then there'll be you know, we might have a really big renewal project. So in the road space, they need to rehabilitate a road pavement. That's a really expensive job that happens once every 80 to 100 years on a piece of road. So it'll be lumpy, that kind of work. So there might be a year where you go over your depreciation income, but then you'll recover that other piece. So we also have to define how we will maintain or improve public health and environmental outcomes, and how we will provide for resilience by identifying and managing natural hazard risk. And to be here, the resilience stuff tends to be dropped into the bottom of our release program, and we're only building resilience, and we're replacing something for other reasons because that program is so huge and trying to scale it. So we are legally required to include water, wastewater, stormwater, roads, footpaths, and flood protection. Luckily, we don't have any flood protection, it's WC, so we don't have to talk about that. Any other assets are at council's discretion. Now, my suggestion would be that because about timelines and the whole thing around 3 waters, we just leave the other assets out this time round. But I do think we need to start bringing in community facilities and particularly on property, for the next infrastructure strategy, which you're actually going to have biggest more advanced at this point, hopefully, in 2 years' time. So, while we might never go this one, in 6 months' time, probably need to start working on those two areas to bring them in for next time, because they'll have to do a whole lot more work around 30-year planning. Next slide. So, we talked to you already about the infrastructure strategy for the LTP. So the reason we're back again is the Water Services Act said we must exclude water. And then in 2024, they came back and said, we must include water now. And obviously, Kiwi came to you in March 2023 and so it was much simpler when it was just a road strategy. Slide. So just, we do these 3-year LTP reviews. The LTPs for a 10-year period, that infrastructure strategy has to show the projects for a 30-year period. And that's because councils always had a habit, and probably still do to some extent, pushing a whole lot of stuff out to year 11. So this makes it really visible. So we do try to smooth across the 30 years and not have huge bow waves happening in year 11 to 15. And obviously this 3-year review next time will only be a 2-year. Slide. So this is a slide you've seen before that I've just added the blue bit on. This is basically how we build up the infrastructure strategy as we look at each of those bubbles. Asset maintenance and renewals hasn't changed since 2021. Demand change there hasn't really been a change in the kind of demand we're seeing on the network. Our growth is still this, we hit the same levels of growth in 2021. Our forecast for 2024 hasn't changed from what it be in 2021, so that's all pretty consistent. The areas where we're seeing change are in those external influences and around level of service expectation, and that's being driven under that public health and environmental bullet point that was on the first slide, and it's because of legislative change. So that's going to influence our program and changes with program also. So just under public health and environmental, we have the drinking water quality assurance rules come out in 2022. We've got much more active regulatory monitoring happening by ORC and ROI, and you guys have seen applications there from ORC to ROI, and now starting to roll into home as well. So it's just going to carry on. We're getting a significant increase in reporting to regulators. Bill 3 that's going to come out just on Christmas, a nice Christmas present for us, is going to include economic regulation requirements for 3 waters. So we haven't really sat and thought about what it's going to mean to us from a resourcing standpoint. And we have this continually moving finish line on a number of issues like treated wastewater discharges, water treatment for small supplies, stormwater management, and because we've got our regional rainwater being flip-flopping around. So until Bill 3 comes out at Christmas time, I'm making a lot of assumptions around what I think is going to be in it based on conversations I've heard from people in the industry who are involved in that discussion. And we know that our consented, as we go for our new water take consents, are dropping the amount we can have and what we're actually taking. So that means there's not that ability to accommodate growth under those takes. Under resilience and natural hazard risk, which we have, is one of those areas we have to think about in the plan. We have really good, we have had a study done on what the implications of climate change would be on this district and what the implications of that is likely to be on our infrastructure. That hasn't changed, like that's the good thing, those sorts of studies on climate change has changed. We well understand that. Obviously, we've had that repeated flooding in Roman Council wastewater treatment site, so that's a resilience related project. We're having climatic vulnerability on the There's basically water supplies that are not on the kitchen. And we have, bridge renewal, so this is where we build resilience and rather than necessarily going and doing upgrades to resilience respected. One thing I would say is we haven't done a lot of slice of this. And we might have been making some structure solutions. Next slide. So just kind of summarise that legislative change. Start with transport. The government policy statement on hand transport says what the government's going to spend its money on, what its priorities are going to be. Typically, we develop our land transport programs to be aligned with what the government's directives are coming up at us, so that we can acquire levels of success with getting our funding. So obviously, the first draft of that we got was in August 2023 under the Labor government, and then when National came in, they put a new government policy statement out in March 2024. So that makes it really difficult from a grant to the citizen.
Between the space.
So it is always really challenging when there's a government change from a government policy statement, because they always change it. The Water Services Act repeal act came out in February, so that repealed the previous government's reform program. And then they brought out the Preliminary Arrangements Act in September, which is the requirement to do water service delivery plans, to look at and the ability to look at the CCRs with the higher technicals. And then what we're waiting for now is the third bill, which is due out in December. So what that is going to tell us, what it's going to include, and this is from the DIA, that's on the website, it's going to have minimum requirements for local government or services providers. I thought it was interesting that it wasn't just local government or service providers and not water service providers. It's going to include economic regulation. It'll have changes to the Te Mana Whārawai legislation, and I pointed out to you before that what I've heard is that they removed this, you have to comply with everything unless it's practical to do so, but we must bring in a bit of that back in for some of the smaller water suppliers to give them a bit more ability to provide exemptions in some cases. It's going to include urban stormwater management, including overland flow paths and water courses. We're not including a lot in our plan around that. We're hoping that we will pick up any requirements that come on us under the depreciation funding that we currently provide for stormwater, because we have been accumulating quite a high positive reserve in stormwater, so we'll be able to cope with it. Hopefully, wastewater environmental performance standards, which is going to have a huge impact on the program. But bearing in mind that I'm taking an approach that they are going to allow us to keep discharging to water, so it's the size of the program down a lot in our own national design standards. Next slide. Previously in our infrastructure strategies, we've promoted that continued use of the business case approach, and I think we want to continue doing that because it really just spells, it puts a common pattern across everything that we do for decision making. And it's largely around the decisions we bring to you about what the project is. And we really need to know why we need to do something, options that provide best value for funding. And we probably moved away from that in the water space, to be fair, because we were working on the National Transition Unit, where the amount of money about what they were asking for was quite different to what the unit was asking. We had to look at contracting options that provide the best outcome. I think the key bullet point in this that's changed is can we afford to do this? And that's why some of our projects change. Even from before under that National Transition Unit to look at civil environment. Next slide. So the other thing that has changed since 2021 is we do have a draft CODC organisation vision now. In the past, we've had no council vision as such, so we've had a separate infrastructure vision. I've I've aligned the infrastructure vision sort of up against the organisational mission, and they are consistent. It just depends which lens you're sort of looking at. The organisational mission has, it's a bit more inwards focus and perhaps than what infrastructure is. So I don't know if there's any appetite to change the infrastructure vision. My suggestion is it's not that broke, so it's not. We should, we can.
We deliver.
We will deliver infrastructure services and support happening. And then that sits in underneath the council's mission to be, say, a safe network community. So they're not keeping consistent. That's the
I don't know
goal.
what else to vision is the funding over
Yes.
promising.
So we also have some draft organisational goals, so I aligned the infrastructure goals and that how strategy previously we called them overarching principles, just to make sure that we were that have inconsistency. And they seven lined up, and they are pretty consistent, I think. I was able to line them up pretty well. Bear in mind that the organisational ones tend to be the inwards focus and again and infrastructure, which is the outwards focus into the I know that one about being equitable to current and future generations is one of the councillors have got quite strong against the So my advice would be in a few pieces that we don't change it, but they line up, that's okay.
How do we have that conversation with communities around the cost of things nowadays? When you're talking about equitable for current and future generations, how do you explain to someone how a roundabout and we didn't pay for this one, but how a roundabout in Cromwell can cost $8 million? And people, everybody, oh, I could do it for 200 grand.
Yeah.
Well,
You
I'm
could
sure
have
you
did it.
could, but
I think that probably comes in under the value for money and affordable one, rather than equitable for future generations. That equitable for future generations is around how you fund it and use the debt or fund it and repaying the depreciation, because otherwise you build the asset, you fund it up front, you depreciate it. You're saying the next generation's not doing it pretty right because this generation's paying to build it and to replace it. Yeah, the value for money one is going to be a challenging session.
no great ideas yet then.
I think it's a challenging conversation.
Yeah.
Our focus around our procurement processes at the moment is really a key step in how we're looking at value for money, but we will have to sit down and come up with a list of points around how we're trying to achieve that value for money stuff.
Well, and affordable,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, that's what, like Sally said before, the overall rate price doesn't necessarily represent what it actually is going to be for individual rate pays.
And the water CCO option may be an ability to provide a more affordable outcome, so that might come onto the.
Although affordability doesn't come into the legislation, it's about sustainability and it's financial sustainability.
Financial sustainable.
And so that means revenue might have to go up to make it financially sustainable, which means we pay more, but
Financial sustainability and affordability is probably pretty closely interlinked. Because you're not going to have financial.
no, not affordability, no, because and we'll get on this discussion later, we don't have to have it now, but I think the financial sustainability will incur uplifts in water budgets more than what we're seeing now.
It's slowly. So, we have a framework for our level of service, how we define that in our documents, and it flows through from the infrastructure strategy into our asset management plans. And it was initially based, in 2018 around, the one network road classification that's used in roading. And we then just extrapolated it across the other infrastructure assets. And it's worked quite well for us. And look, we would say it's a good way to define our levels of service. You see, doing a generating rating, and that follows what, that helps us for reporting up. Structural weaknesses of the city definitions as well. So the big thing is prioritising this comes into the whole thing for ability to succeed. And so there's a financial reality here. We are legally required now under the Water Services Income Act, provisional act, meet minimum standards for water and wastewater. We're told what they are next month. And we have to provide water infrastructure required to service growth. So obviously what we're doing is really helping us understand that. My gut feel at the moment is we're possibly a bit light on what we program with the wastewater because we don't have hydraulic models for wastewater. And we possibly we may be a bit optimistic around the timing of some of those growth projects that are going to be required. It just depends how fast the subdivisions come on in the different parts of the network. And then we're going to need to stay within DB limits and 3 years space, particularly well, wherever it is. So that's going to significantly limit the extent of work that can be delivered across all of the council. At 3 wards remains in council because it'll be a deep limit. I think that's going to actually really impact on this. So while you've just looked at percentages, that might be that we're reaching deep limits, we're going to have to look at capital programs, cut things out.
So when you say capital programs, being capital programs for the infrastructure space?
No, across council, because we have to be legal across all of council. However, we're going to have so it means your ability to make those reductions will sit in road. It might involve saying we can't replace those rural bridges because we can't access the debt to do so. It might mean we can't do that hall or that community centre or whatever because we don't have access to it. So I think as we start to have conversations with the community around 3 waters and CCOs, I think that's going to be a really relevant point. And I used to drive past rural properties, so stop 3 waters and think you're not connected to the river. And do you understand that the councils don't have the capacity of the rural bridges and things that are blocked out? So I have to do something legal response around stuff. So I think the conversation needs to be time to what it means to people. Wayne? So for the water, when I was trying to undo the 30-year, well, I've actually really just focused on the plan at the moment, to be honest. But the program for the timing of the projects and the water approvals program, I pulled together a matrix that was on the engineering matrix. And we had to kind of say, if we've got a project that's being done for compliance requirements or safety, that one's more important. Is it more important to do Ranfurly or Omaka? And so Ranfurly was higher because Ranfurly's had compliance notice issued on it. And Omaka hasn't been. So what we need to do is actually adjust this for roadings, and I've sat down with the QP and we think we can do that reasonably simply.
And we've used a similar matrix, like we've got the first search matrix, put over the first removals, and everything like that. So it's just actually aligning open activities across this, because we do have a lot of renewable transport, and that's just aligning.
Can you go to the next slide, please, Mike? So this probably is we in the water space, we've worked really programming in resilience projects. If a project was done simply for aesthetic reasons, because people don't like the taste of the water, but these sort of legal requirements, it's a local priority. High line, for example, would be a local priority. High line right at the moment. So the regs just things that have been in the last day where we really need to sit down as a committee.
But even that, like, there's amenity encompassed as well. So you might have slightly up the road, which is what it may be seen to be, but it also may be an to come. So around as an underlying programming for those cycles rather than potentially a single extension. And then potentially pulled out as my priorities. So
an example would have been Sandflat Road ceiling that was discussed yesterday at the Cromwell Community Board. You know, it's really coming down. It's probably actually capable in the very low category because it's to have, you know, widespread public dissatisfaction is like all of Alexandra being up in arms because of the lineman for that. If you're talking about a small group of people, it's not widespread. And so zero extensions get thrown down. And it's just a net 30 payment within our graduate. So we do need to do a bit of work on this, and we would propose bringing this back to you with review and there's a video for the time to look at it and get us feedback before we actually adopt it. This is how we propose it.
And I think if you've got that thing that puts the element like the bridge strategy of, you know, fairness, because that's always the challenge is which communities will be prioritised. And if everything's being assessed against the same set of criteria, then at least you know that it's not favouring any particular area over another.
As long as it's become a rural urban argument, because I can see some of that stuff becoming like what you just said before, Jimmy, about a rural urban argument. And that won't fly at all.
I think that there's a sad reality though that does become sometimes a bit of an understatement about we've got this that's really important, and we've got this that's really important, and there's way more people being impacted by this than that. And it's just a reality. It's not anyone saying this work's more important than that, but it's just it's an understatement or legislation. So both on the website. So I think we've been trying to level programs out, which I spent a lot of time in the free water space trying to do this. They're trying to pull things out. There's other factors which really do influence it, as well as priority. So it's our capacity to deliver. We know that as we went through the stimulus area, we've had stimulus funding, we were able to deliver around $30 million a year a checking program. You know, anything more than that, and it's going to be a real struggle. You've got to be realistic around the time it takes to investigate, design, consent, procure, and construct a project. So if you said to me, Alexandra's Wastewater is the #1 priority, Julie, we want it done fast, it's still going to take 5 or 7 years to deliver it because that's the time it's going to take to work through the processes. And so I've got it in as fast as I possibly can, but it's not finished in year 7. That's coming on a bit sooner, but not the whole thing. There's the availability of third-party protocol implications of third-party projects or developments or funding. So the developers doing work that we tying in with NZL or Katari NZTA funding. NZTA with on state highways, just that we're wanting to put pipes in, so there's going to receive over the top of them, sort of electronic coordinates and things. So you do, there's just the whole levelling. As soon as you start moving things around to level out that expenditure, because some of these projects are like 5 or 7 year projects, you don't have a lot of ability to move those around. So it might be that you have a smaller project that's not linked to other things that's more easy to move around, so that ends up getting load while other things don't. And then there's changes coming. Say, we've got a program to use this, and we're going to issue compliance notices on it, and then there'll be outlet constraints. It's going to be a real implication for us. And I think that's the last of my slides. But you know, folk will come and be happy.
That's a bit of bloody soft, isn't it?
So, yeah, we're open to feedback. So, thank you. Are we in the right thinking into this one?
Questions or comments, anyone?
We can't comment because it's legislated,
Just not.
so
right direction, the idea that we actually know what we've got coming for the next 30 years as opposed to the next 3 to 10, right? Seems like a great idea.
And it needs to just be a big list that gets put in. And there's certain things like, we know membranes on treatment plants have to be placed at certain intervals, and that's a peaky expenditure for us. So every 7 years, you'll see there's a sun comes up the body. Yeah, bridges are similar. You're right. In 1 year, and I've got a 25-year life, so when you're writing renewals in the 30 year, you'll see there'll be a big peak 1 year and all the lights have to be in place.
Great, thank you. And I think you get to stay there, Julie.
Yeah, this next one's really just an opportunity to have a question and answer. You hopefully you would have seen that the Morrison Lowe report was there, which was presented to mayors and chief executives at the last few weeks around the work that the mayor's tasked the Cs to go away with to look at a range of options that we could take under the local water services, local water done well plan. The last bit of work that Morrison Lowe, the large report, was looking at what would a multi-council CCO look like? What would be its benefits in terms of how does it stack up financially if we try and work through everyone's draft budgets to get a sense of how does the look and feel of it. And you'll see that there were a couple of options presented, one being all Otago Southland councils, and you'll see that in there. Ideally, if you were to go multi-council, that's a good option because you get the scale and the map. But understanding the differences at the political level around council tables, that might be difficult to get to in the next few years. The next option they looked at what would rural councils look like? Because there's probably a little bit more support potentially around that one. So on and so on. So you've got the information. We have to bring a paper to council, and we'll get some guidance today to council, because that's the end of the work that we were tasked to do. And so the next stage of the work, which we would be needing, and all councils will need to pass a resolution on this, would be along the lines of go away and look at a multi-council option for the Otago Southland region and do the work on that, because we haven't really delved into that as a part of the water services delivery plan. And all councils will be asked to take that paper to their respective councils this side of Christmas. So we can start planning in earnest, because time is against us in terms of where we need to be. So it's really an opportunity just to get any questions you have about a council controlled organisation. I guess off the bat, we cannot run this in status quo. What we will end up being is someone who fixes water and we mow lawns once every sort of 6 years, because that's all we can afford to do. A council controlled organisation is probably the only way a small council like this can fund water. And even going forward, if you set up a council controlled organisation based on a single council model, which we could explore, it's the same cost as what we're saying now, but with an increased management cost, because it's, you're going to pay for a board for a start, so on and so on. And so there's additional cost to them. So really, hopefully you've all had a chance to have a read of that information, and it's just an opportunity with Julie and I here to ask questions, because we have a meeting this week, CEs. What's the next stage? The question is, what's the next stage? And then mayors will be meeting in early December, and again, their discussion will be, what's the support around the council tables to going forward with this?
So just to add to it, because next Friday, Tom and I will sit down and go through what, if we were to go for a standalone single council CCO, what would be cost, what would the cost of that? So Tom, the question I'll be dealing with a little bit, Talon, a few other councils around the country, it's kind of things that we're calling and so you've got that as well as all councils.
So from the workshop and from the Morrison Lowe, what I can see is that we sit and not in that band, we actually sit in not a bad place for either or. So it's not gonna be, you're gonna be splitting hairs to whether we do essentially the status quo or go, the going single or going with neighbouring councils. So I guess what I am wondering is it's really big figures coming down the track for water. And at what point do we let our communities know what kind of money they're going to be up for? Because that is the incredibly scary part, that most people are going to just about fall off their chairs when they find out what these numbers are looking like.
And I think that's what we need to look at with our CCO option, is that for the next 2 years, it's going to be going up. And probably from the report and the workshops and things that I've been to, the benefit to us of being in a joint CCO is what you start seeing as you get towards the end of that 10 years. And if we're taking a longer term view of things, there's some concern, I guess, for me and some of the other smaller councils around, if you have 67 councils going into single council CCOs, where are you going to get 67 competent boards? And if you are a water services specialist that's also active in the governance space and you're looking at 15 different opportunities, what sort of board are we going to get if we're on our own? Whereas if you start combining with others, then you get, it's not necessarily that safety in numbers, but the key thing I think for me coming out of that Morrison Load thing is every council in Otago and Southland is better off if they are with at least one other person, one other council. In the long run, because there's startup costs that will be faced. It's not like we're going to go out and say, hey, guess what, if we join with these 3 or 4 other councils, all of a sudden your water bill is going to go down, because it's not, it's still going to go up. And that's going to be really difficult to communicate that to our communities, because we've all been sat here for at least 2 years talking about this. Some of us 5 years, some of us 10 years or more. And even we still find it difficult. How do we get this out to the community so they can make an informed submission on what they think is going to be the good option? There are councils in Otago and Southland that are willing to work with this council as a joint CCO model. And that's the paper that will come to this council, is do we want to ask Morrison Lowe or whoever it be to model the numbers based on us being in a joint CCO with these other councils. It doesn't mean that that's the option that we'll choose. It would just mean that we would have a wee bit more certainty in the numbers, and the numbers will never be perfect. We are not going to be able to go out to our community and say this is definitely what it's going to cost, because it'll be, how close do you think it's going to be, Julie? A ballpark or?
I will tell you, it's quite clear to be certain about our numbers. So how can we be certain about, 4 or 5 councils? It's all is it will change, but it gives you, you're always planning on what they know now, and not planning on what they know now too. And what Morrison Knoll have done is they've kind of done a bit of moderating across that, and they've seen as one council's taken a slightly different approach, like I've taken the water, discharges, wastewater discharges to land out with the water, but I think one council hadn't done that. They moderated their council's numbers to their door. So that's the role that we play. I did look at the setup costs of taking national transition unit numbers, and it's probably set down to
those costs would be capitalised. They explained that, so that would be added onto the existing, with the debt that would be transferred across, plus the cost to establish the service.
So essentially, we've got to go out with 2 options, or can we go out with 3?
Well, we have one. You can't go out with one. You've got to have 2, and so the status quo is what's going to be in the LTP is one option, and then it's what are the alternatives.
At what stage are we going to find out how this is going to work with the different councils' debt levels? How is that going to affect our council and other, or our rate payers when other councils have different debt levels? A lot of our community will want that kind of detail, and if we don't know ourselves,
When will we find that sort of thing out?
Well, I mean, the indicative, the debt levels that are represented in that document are indicative on the information that councils currently have and are forecast. So if the council's done their LTP, then there's a reasonable degree of certainty around that. Ours is we've had to plug in the numbers that we're thinking about in the LTP, but we haven't adopted an LTP. So it's what we see in that document is a fairly significant indication of where the debt levels are going to be. Ultimately, the revenue that is accrued from the entity is sufficient as they've modelled to service the debt and still have headroom. Because actually without debt, we're not going to be able to upgrade our water anyway. So we're all going to have quite high debt, and our debt is growing and it'll outstrip our prudential levels if we don't get a credit rating, and then eventually it'll outstrip 285% or come close to it.
That's the thing that I'm struggling with at the moment, is we have to go out to our communities and say the status quo is an option, but it's not. Like Julie said at the end of the table, saying within the 10 years, all of our debt will be held in Three Waters and we'll have no ability to do anything else. But yet we've still got to go out and say, do you want the status quo? And we've got a number of people in our community who are going, oh, it's not broken. Why would we? Yes, it seems to be working fine at the moment. And we sat around this table know that it's not working fine.
I don't think you have to say, do you want the stats? You've got to include the stats of what it would look like.
Yeah.
And you get the stats from, so in order to get the debt that you need, you have to increase your revenue because it's a ratio of revenue. And so that's why you see revenue going up so high, because as the debt need goes up, the revenue has to go up to be able to leverage it. So you'd be showing, this is what it'll look like, our preferred options, a CCO.
When we talk about the CCO, it's my understanding that however that is set up can be managed within each one. So it could be that the debt is ring fenced for.
It can, that's right. Certainly, it doesn't have to have harmonisation. So you pay as you pay. In time, you might want to go to harmonisation, but it doesn't have to start out that way. So it can be structured a number of ways. Yeah, and including, I think the comment they made about the debt was, it's not impossible, but it would be incredibly complicated to ring fence the debt against the various shareholding councils and that. So you said it's not impossible,
No.
but it's challenging.
And it may be that not everybody pays exactly the same from day one.
That's right.
So the makeup of a CCO, are we being told what that has to be look like?
Well, no, that's to be determined because each council.
That's the grouping that can determine.
Oh, yeah. So, well, first of all, it has to be a coalition of the willing,
Yeah.
because we not want to waste our time drafting documents that, you know, there'll be some councils out there.
There's going to be a portion of the community that's going to want to know what the makeup of that CCO is going to, not the entities that are part of it,
Okay.
what that board's going to look like.
Oh, yeah. Well, and the
Because
board,
that is going to be
so the way that will
a
work,
question that people are going to get.
eventually
upset
that will come out in the legal arrangements that are drafted. How do the shareholding councils elect the board? Because that responsibility will sit with the shareholding councils to appoint the chair and the board, and then the board will appoint a chief executive, and they'll do all the hiring. That sort of stuff is part of those arrangements have to be worked through.
And the reality is not.
No.
Yeah, you will be consulting with the community around an intent, a proposal to do something that we're going to have to work through.
Yeah, and
detail on and maybe.
And the government is very clear on this one, that has to be professional boards at arm's length to the councils.
I understand that.
So in some ways so it could be that it could be 3 people from a area, 2 people from another area, because that's where the professional expertise is needed for the board. And because they'll be professionals, they'll take, you know, the compliance, regulatory roles and functions are the areas where their prioritisation process will probably stem from, type thing.
And not be as directors, they don't have the same legal credentials as councillors, so they will be, they will look at things differently. And not everybody's going to want to be a director because it does take some liability risk. Especially for small council CCOs, that you're not getting, you know.
I think the challenge for a small council like ours is if we were not to go into a type of CCO arrangement, I think what happens is, you know, we have some specialist staff here. Eventually, the mass and scale of a combined CCO will be such that, you know, because people will be dispersed working around the country, there'll be more scaled. It will impact on our ability to recruit staff and all that sort of stuff. We literally cannot survive as a small council status quo. That's definitely, we have to put it in the option, but that's madness. Oh, we have a legal answer.
I just wondered about just really for really emphasis to actually gathering supplies. Do you know, or you can put any information about in the third local down well bill passed?
No, we just know they're gonna launch it. And from past experience, that usually means about the 23rd.
Okay, so when is the legislation going to be passed?
So they run them through pretty quickly. Something it's not like they have to get, they don't give you any time to do submissions and that when these things go. The other one came out about August and I think it's passed on the 2nd of September. I think it's literally.
So when you talk about a bill and the sort of practical thinking, that's virtually the legislation.
Yeah.
Done and dusted.
Although the bit around liberal service delivery plans and was in Bill 2.
Yeah, so we have that information. So that's good. It's just the third one.
But there's a bit vague around, Peter, you know, what you have to include in the consultation. It's saying where it's available, you may include it, but it's kind of implying that you should still be consulting even if you don't.
It also says you may want to roll it into your LTP consultation. That's a question that I have to ask other chief executives who are in the same predicament as us. Will the timeline allow that? It might not. What they do say is you have to have done the consultation before you submit your water services delivery plan to DIA. So that by the end of September, you have to have consulted on the two models that you're, you know, this A model versus another model. That's what you've just got to consult on.
Just bear in mind that both government elections are not elections.
Yeah. Just
You guys tested that expensive water.
An LTP consultation and a water service delivery plan consultation, and it's also, it's going to get quite confusing in the public.
I want to have the council be protesting about Three Waters done well compared to Three Waters.
No, it's water services now.
Water, yeah, exactly.
your local water done well.
You never see Three Waters coming out of the coalition government, and Three Waters is that titles.
They killed it.
Peter, just a question for you. When you've been talking to the Cs and the mayors and you're looking at the Morrison Low, are you also getting DIA to look at our?
So DIA have actually have put an offer out to help us. DIA don't have much capacity, but they are. If there was a consensus of enough councils felt we should explore a multi-council CCO in the Otago Southern region, they would certainly support those councils in working towards it.
And Ngāi would also offer that support.
So one last inquiry, just to put my knowledge of these things. Can here to the coalition of plan. What are they?
It's been a long journey.
And
Formal steps.
yeah, so it needs, first of all, what it needs is, well, it needs a couple of things. It needs the mayors to agree in December, but this is the coalition of the willing. And it needs a council resolution to direct staff to work with these other councils in preparing a multi-council CCO option as part of the water services development plan scenario.
And in the past, that sometimes gets done through a memorandum of understanding.
Yeah, there might be an MOU drawn up or something. And all that does, it just gives staff the appropriate authority to go away and look at what does the multi-council CCO look like for Otago South. Because it's not a decision that we're going to do it, because we still then have to consult on that. And we have to, and then at a stage of decisions to go even further forward, then all these legal documents, shareholding agreements, bloody company act, Christ, I'm not a lawyer. There's a lot of work that needs to be done.
And that's,
Structure of the organisation
No.
will be, where the staff will be located or what, or any of that, all you're doing is the CCO company structure. And all-
And it would be a 2 to 3 year process to actually formally establish a CCO. I think DIA, I believe that some councils are in the view that they'll do it by 1st of July 2027. And they think that's achievable but ambitious. But yeah, councils have to have met the requirement of the Act by 2028. You've got to be financially sustainable, which probably means then that you'd probably 1st of July 2028, you'd probably want to have stepped into a CCO.
Yeah.
Right, as Chris said, the secret bill, or the bill still be done through.
Well, that's, you know, I mean, if you created a multi-council CCO, then ideally in time, you would want to create the infrastructure to support that. So they would get their bill from the Water Services Delivery Agency for X, and they would get it from them.
which is what happens in Auckland.
Yeah, but it took Auckland a few years to get to that stage. So it wasn't instantaneous.
And even with that, previous government's proposal, there was an arrangement where they could negotiate the councils to contingency allowed for a 2-year period.
Yeah. So there'd be a transition. So I guess going forward, the intent would be that there doesn't seem to be any strong opposition not to. So we'll probably we'll have a meeting with Cs this week, find out who is thinking they're in the coalition of the William, and prepare a paper that will go in front of each council. Ideally, if we could do that in November, December timeframe, that then just gives the authority for the staff to collaborate, use Morrison Road, and go away. And what does a multi-council CCO look like for this region south of Waitaki? And we'll see which councils want to be a part of that and which ones don't.
It's probably not a huge job from CIS to rerun the numbers for the chance to agree, because we've all done the numbers, they've got in.
But it was
That's the big thing at the moment,
Yeah.
is that, and we don't want to do that work modelling councils that are still on the fence.
Yes.
And that's why it needs to come to each council table, for each council to say, we're on board with modelling what this looks like, because there are councils sat on the fence still, and we need to whittle it out so we can have some surety in those numbers, for us to go to council. Yeah. Sure.
That pretty much what I was, just going to say. Ask, sorry.
Yeah, I just think that I agree with that approach. Following on with what Cheryl said, there will be members of our community that will want to know the detail. And they're probably our best bet to help educate other people as well, those people that are really engaged. Whatever way they sit, but that is going to be a really important piece to make sure that we have got really robust numbers.
And they're going to be as best they can, and a big part of it is going to be understanding that longer term view and not fixating on what the numbers look like for the next 2 years or 10 years, because what cost the same today as it cost 10 years ago. It's going to be around that. Is our ratepayer is going to be better off in the long run if we're in a combined CCO, and what does that look like for them, and how do we communicate that with everybody?
I think one of the things we do have to do, as part of the consultation requirements, we have to do advantages and disadvantages. And I think it would be quite good if we actually did a bit of, I'll try and force some stuff to be done, because it's the non-financial stuff, the financial ones, the one everybody's focused on at the moment, but it's actually articulated those non-financial ones now.
And I think you touched on that with the staffing and the capacity and the delivery capability.
And look, a rural council CCO, how's that going to work? They're too small, and you can really disperse very well. We're going to have a whole of South Island money, and we're going to make that work. So, target South and rural ones. There's they've become really specialised in the delivery of water and wastewater for the kinds of communities that exist across the Otago and Southland, which is actually a smaller community. So you're pulling that big city stuff out.
And in terms of funding this work, we had to, when the government came in, they gave a decree, told every council that we had to pull funding from the Better Off funding, what we had previously allocated, unspent, repurpose that. I think we set aside 173,000. We've used some of that to do this initial work with Morrison, and I don't know what and we can use that money to help support our water service development plan. So I don't know where that budget's sitting right now.
I don't think it's
So that's where the funding will come to support this body of work. So it's money that we will receive by the government as part of free will. So we have funds set aside to enable us to do this.
So, Tamara, what's your gut about the other councils that the other mayors and the other councils that we've been dealing with? You think that we can work with some of them?
At the moment, there are 4 mayors who've indicated a willingness to work together in Otago and Southland. And the 4 of us, and that's not to say that the others aren't willing, it's just to say that they feel that at the moment they're looking to explore other options, or it just doesn't work for them right now. There are 4 right now that have said we will, recognising that the mayor is only one person around the table, so they will all take before their councils prior to Christmas a paper, and I think we're probably all going to have the same
similar, very similar,
similar paper, so that everybody's getting the same information, where we would look at a resolution to say we want or don't want to be included in the modelling of that numbers. And at least then everybody's starting from the same place with a willingness to go forward in that space and see what it looks like. And it's not a commitment to definitely be in at the other end of our consultation period, but at least it's showing a willingness to engage in those next steps.
So 3+ us.
3+ us, yeah, with the possibility of another one.
Right.
Yeah. But they would have to be locked in prior to Christmas, because we need to have what councils are this so-called coalition.
But they can join at a later date.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean,
So-
down the path of CCOs could be established, could be quite a number of established, and over time they could aggregate the
Yeah, so there'll be some councils, would they not, that would actually allow certain councils to join, create this multiple CCO, and then watch and see how it works, and then think, oh, okay, it's working, and then join.
And there might be a time frame, like it might be, look, it's just going to be these for 5 years, and then if you decide you want to join after that, or 3 years, or 10 years, or whatever it be, so that would be part of the discussions that whatever councils are in from the start can say, look, we're just going to be us, and no one else can join for X amount of time.
What the, I mean, head of workshop and water conference, there's number of different organisations spoken about that. Lots of some groups have said is joining in later will inevitably be more complex and more expensive for you. And the other thing that the DIA said is I can't remember, there was a percentage of councils that they said they will not be able to do this as a single CCO. It's just not going to be. So some of these councils, they have to be part of something. We might have that, and we don't know yet because we haven't really run the numbers, but we may have the ability to be single, but we haven't really run the numbers.
Yeah, but would we be able to attract a professional board? Someone run a small council, that's the job.
But some of the people, when they run the numbers, it's not going to be on their own, so they have to be CC. And what you'll get is that bigger councils will have their ability to run on their own, something like us.
And the biggest challenge we would face is to take our community along with us on this journey. Because, not everybody's going to read the Morrison report, if they do, even absorb it. Trying to explain why or how we've got here and why we've got here is a real challenge. It is. Because it is going to cost. We've always known it's going to cost.
So this option is going to cost more than 3 water reforms.
No, those numbers that have been bandied about look less.
No, but NPD was 2,000 average.
Yeah.
Here we're proposing, it's looking like it could be as much as 4,000.
Yeah.
Which was what? The teaming technique, which wasn't a kind of stuff. It
Yeah.
wasn't medical things.
Four person, yeah.
But they didn't have the ability to leverage debt like this.
So any last questions?
Okay, so we'll, see how it goes on this Friday with CEs, then see who, get a different feel of who that is, and we'll prepare a paper to take in front of each council.
Oh, yeah, it's time to change.
Hopefully not, that right. Lee. Come on out, it's Julie.
So just mentioned Stu, to my right, who is the team leader for the building, and then Wayne, my left, who is the team leader for environmental health. I guess to start off with, for this, we're talking about. Next slide, please, Wayne. So just by way of a reminder, we talk about environmental health first of all, is that, and these are the main areas that Wayne and his team would be working in relation to the food of, you know, when we're getting those new applications coming in, they have to be done within a certain time frame of 6 weeks. And we have got a backlog of the audits or the verifications that we're doing because of resourcing challenges, and we'll come on to that in a second. And in having that backlog, that does have a reduction in relation to the level of income that we were aiming to get, and so there's a flow-on effect in relation to that. And when we have the delays in relation to Wayne and his team being able to get out to do those audits, and we're also, it's fair to say that we're also finding a deterioration, or we can find a deterioration in the level of compliance of those premises. And so what that means is where Wayne and his team are working on doing one inspection or one audit within a 12 to 18 month time frame, that might mean that we've got increased frequencies, and so we have to go back every 3 months. And so the workload has just gone from 1 to 4. And then multiply that by the number of premises that you can see. I can appreciate the amount of work that then increases for that. Noise to come up onto that, you know, we're getting more subdivisions as we're aware. With the subdivisions, we're getting smaller sections, we're living closer together. That means we'll increase, you know, for heat pumps for argument's sake, but therefore we're getting an increase.
Fireworks.
That could be banned, Tracy.
For that. And then we've got the alcohol work in addition to all of that. So, well, we're having an increase in population, it's not just people that are living here, we're getting an increase in businesses as well as before. Next slide, please, Wayne. So in addition to that piece of work, we also have these pieces of work as well of all these other types of businesses that Wayne and his team again are equally responsible to go out and ensure the compliance levels for that. And in the middle, the views of MPI, so the compliance we are required to undertake from an operational point of view, and that you are required to ensure from a governance level is that you're getting the audits that we're having to do, the quality assurance system that we have, that we need to ensure for Wayne and Fiona, the other environmental officers, to make sure they are competent and maintain their competency as food act officers to enable us to provide that level of service, basically. Next slide, please. In short, what we're seeing is workloads going up, but the resourcing at the moment is less than what we need, and which I'll come on to in a second. And it's getting more, basically. And so we are struggling to keep up with, even with status quo, we're struggling to keep up with that. And next slide, please. So you may recall this slide. So let's see if two just come back now. This slide we showed you in the September workshop, and at that time I was looking for direction in relation to the national programme side of things, of whether or not we wanted us to retain doing that, or if we wanted to stop providing that service to basically push those smaller businesses to have to go to the likes of Queenstown or to Dunedin or to Christchurch to have that service with increasing cost. Well then, or we may see a reduction in the services that they provide to our communities. And at that time, you've given me direction saying, no, we're comfortable with where that is. So that's just a reminder of all that. The next slide, please. And so what we were looking at sort of 12 months ago on the previous is that we have 3 environmental health officers. We have an alcohol licensing inspector who we were training as part of the succession planning for Wayne and his team. And we got about 0.8 of an FTE for the support for that. We've gone out 2 to 3 times to try and get additional resourcing. We did manage to get 1. So we have 2 environmental health officers. We have increased the the support for that to try and take away some of the work so that when you can focus on the technical side of things, I'm starting to work with a mature student who is starting the diploma to become an environmental health officer. And so we're supporting her, a young lady, to hopefully be able to be of the intention for this, basically, for us to keep up with what we need to do is, with Sarah, who's the student who we're supporting at the moment, she's taken up that 0.4 of the level of staffing that we have at the minute. The intent, and as Paul spoke to earlier, is that we've included the cost of having additional FTE in the first year of the long-term plan to bring her on board. And then whilst she'd have the qualification, there's still going to be a level of training which she's doing with us at the moment as well to get her up to speed, to enable us to deliver the level of service, but also then to start a second student. And I hope Wayne doesn't mind me saying this, because within the next 4 years, Wayne and Fiona will be knocking on the door of retirement. And so we're working towards that. We're working towards the succession planning. Trying to find environmental health officers is equally as challenging as trying to find building control officers or engineers and planners. We have to, and we are doing developing our own. That takes time, takes commitment. But having those within our community, and Wayne from his experience and Dunedin previously as well, is that we get that longevity because their families here, particularly when we have people who are going into a second or third career, a bit more mature, will we have that investment that we can retain basically. So that's the long and short of that pitch. Explain. Do that.
No, I think that, the process, just to give you a bit of the background, is to get a student qualified. It's at least 2 years at the Massey University course, and then at least another year getting the MPI Food Safety Officer warrants. It's not a quick fix, but my past experience, as he said, is trained through 4 of the neat stuff, and homegrown and home trained is a better outcome of an environmental health officer for our regulatory services, in my opinion, than which we weren't successful at trying to advertise and recruit somebody in. So, but it's not a quick fix. But that's what we're working on. Yeah, and the other thing, going back to some of Lee's previous slides, is it's just it's not a fixed target and regulatory work. It's growing. I mean, that's in a nutshell. In the last couple of months, I must have processed about 24 brand new food businesses. And that just adds on to the existing portfolio we've got, and it's not slowing up. I've got one today, one last week, and to deliver that work, which isn't discretionary, as a recognised agency, Central Target Council have to do this. We have to have our stripes and badges, and that takes quite a lot of keeping up with. And you've got to get out there and do the inspections of them. So it's just it was a fixed target. Where is it? But it's growing, and that's food. But it's growing. In the time I've managed the noise here, we've gone from about 100 complaints a year to 200 up to 300. It just keeps growing, And
just the final note on that one there is if we compare just for environmental health food with some of our neighbours, a rough average is 1 environmental health officer to every 100 premises. At the moment, what we're looking at, in addition to the alcohol side of things, is about 190 for each environmental health officer with us. It's just not sustainable. So it's all this within the long-term plan, but Paul made reference to. So that's that one. The news doesn't change much for the next topic. That's very from a building point of view. Equally as important is, up there is just giving you the brief overview from a building consenting authority perspective. And so there's 2 halves. There's the TA side of it and there's the BCA side of it. Each of those of what we've got at the moment, and in the middle, the ongoing challenge of accreditation, but we have the increasing challenges of compliance for that. This week, I'm pleased to say that we have cleared all of the general non-compliances from the last, which was setting for the last IANS audit. But on saying that and moving on to the next slide, please, Wayne, we will be soon be starting the audit requirements for ENVI, which I'll come on to in a second. This is just a quick snapshot for you, just in relation to that we're linking in with our colleagues in the neighbouring BCAs, is that when we're looking at the levels of consent, basically again for Stu and his team, they are punching above their weight basically. The numbers that we're getting, the neighbouring authorities certainly have, I would say, more building control officers to enable them to meet the timeframes that they need to meet. And we are meeting timeframes currently, but team are keeping their nose above water. And again, it is not sustainable for that. And in looking at these from a BCA perspective, the next slide, please, Wayne, we then come on to the TA functions. And so these are all the other functions that as council that we are responsible for. And it's fair to say that MB and Stu met with MB yesterday on a couple of matters of the level of compliance, the requirements that they're looking for is increasing as MB themselves are getting the pressure from central government, basically, for what MB needing to deliver. Next slide, please. So what we're looking at here is 3 additional FTEs. What I'm looking to do immediately. Because otherwise we're seriously at risk of not meeting the requirements for our accreditation. And you can imagine there's only been one council in New Zealand that lost its accreditation, that was Christchurch. We will be the second. And Stu can talk to his experience of when he was able to do it and how close that was to them. I'm pretty confident. The second is from a TA point of view is that the increasing requirements for us, we need to have something to focus on, otherwise we are at risk of not meeting the requirements that we need to follow. And in having that, again, another BCO will enable us to ensure that we're starting to build the team again to make sure that we're able to meet the requirements for our waiting times for inspections have pushed out to as much as 18 days, working days. That is not acceptable. So we've had to bring in contractors to help down and Stu with his team have significantly reduced that to, sort of 6 to 10 days. Again, that's still not okay for what we need to achieve basically for our requirements. So I guess this is more of a pitch to make you aware that we'll be looking to go out, so it gets a bit more like a statement of intent. We do have the surplus that Paul has been referenced to previously that we'll be looking to utilise for this and I think Paul will work with us on to sort of offset any rating impact for that. Correct, if I got the language wrong, but Paul. But then to review what the position looks like then for next LTP, basically, because the world will
And just for the councillors, this is funded out of the fees and charges and.
Correct. So it's funded out of the fees and charges, but again, specifically for these positions, we'll be looking to utilise the service as well. Yeah.
It doesn't have a rate impact, it would have a fees and charges impact with costs.
So at the moment, Paul, correct me when I get this wrong, front is what we're looking at for this is the fact that from fees and charges, we've got our fees and charges where there are at the moment. And with the surplus that we have, we'll be looking to utilise that surplus for these roles to minimise the impact on rates basically. And from what Paul put there earlier of the increase that we were looking at, from a regulatory perspective, I think it was 0.33% overall that we'll be looking at as an increase for that.
Yeah, in terms of the reserve, it's about $2.9 million. It can only be used for building control, and all these percents has to be collected. The proposal is that, well, there's a component of user fees that go into that and rates. So we knock the rates off the head for a period of time because we've got the surplus, and we reduce the surplus that we generated in past years to cover any losses that we might make because we don't have enough rates. And what Lee's talking about, reducing the cost, obviously these people, then we would use the surplus up faster, effectively. There will come a point in time when we've used the surplus, and then we have to make a commitment to put rates back in annual or increase special charges.
Yes, this is the classic area where user pays though. Yeah.
Absolutely, and so that's the conversation that I can bring back to the table, because we review the fees and charges every year. What we're looking at the moment is, and proposal is that I'll link to the for is to say, with the surplus that we've got, we would chop out then, it's been approximately 690,000 in rates contribution previously for the user pay versus public good. Chopping that out and to utilise the surplus. Once we can start to see after the first year, well, how are we looking on that? Can we chop it out for the second year? Yes or no? Do we need to increase fees? Yes or no? And then we go again for the second year as part of the LTP process for 2027.
Rates would fund the universal benefit, you know, that underlying, which everybody got then, majority cost should sit with the user.
With this, and absolutely, Martin, for that, but with this, first and foremost, we'll utilise the surplus that we have versus any rating.
Yeah.
But by getting, the inspections done fast, but also get development and everything's coming.
Absolutely, provided we get the co-compliance certificates, and Julie and I are working in relation to that piece of work as well, yes.
So you say recruit immediately? Is that a possible?
Well, we certainly have a possibility for the auditing side of things. We certainly have a possibility, a strong possibility for the TA function side of things, through conversations from that perspective. And then from the BCO side of things, Stu's very good at reaching out and has been very successful so far. And so we would look at what can we do in that space. Basically, we have a fortunate
current proposals from central government change legislation in this field.
Yeah.
I know it's probably too early for you guys to have a definitive view on it, but are you optimistic that it may lower workloads?
Absolutely can, from a meeting that I had with them yesterday.
Right.
Yeah, I think MB, there's a public consultation document that MB have often put together. They reached out to us yesterday from a BCA perspective. They're also going to builders, architects. They're wanting a public consultation document about mid next year, probably July, with the end of the year going back to the minister with perhaps a preferred option. There's 3 options at the moment. So effectively, we're probably 14, 15 months before it even gets to the cabinet table. So it's probably going to be 2 years away before any changes could legislation.
Councils should be very aware of this, because the fear, of course, is the repeat of what happened in the 90s with the legislative changes there that fast tracking building consent process, which immediately led to leaky building syndromes, which cost many councils multiple millions of dollars. We were fortunate that we only had a handful of cases.
They're very cognizant of that, and they were very communicative yesterday to say they are mindful of shortfall of building control officers, and in no way, shape or form are they looking to move the location of building control officers or reduce the number they have for the need for it, basically. So that absolutely gave us some, I guess, the feedback that we were seeking as to what does this picture actually look like, but we are a wee way away yet. Very early stage.
What's it like now?
Yeah. If I could just give you some feedback, where I think this council is sitting at the moment. I've previously, I'm Packers team leader, but I've previously worked at the CODC for 8 years, which was about 8 years ago, as team leader. And I moved to, still living in Alex, but was building control manager in Queenstown for a year, and sort of went through accreditation. I'm just going to give you sort of an idea of what can go wrong. And I think we're sort of in a very similar situation, just where we are at the moment here, as far as a routine assessment over there in about 2016. And it's a 4 days, the IANZ auditors come onto site and they go scrutinise everything. On the last day, the legal auditor said, you and I need to go and have a talk to the chief executive. We're thinking of pulling your accreditation. Now, as Lee said before, there's only one council in New Zealand that was pulled, and that was Christchurch. That takes your ability away to do any processing and inspecting any code of compliance certificates. Believe me, it's not a space that council wants to be in. We ended up having a very serious meeting with the chief executive, and then the regulatory manager myself having to front the council, just what you people are here, and explain why we're in this situation. And probably in a nutshell, the reason that they were in that situation then was they had a BCA manager that was doing the BCA manager's role. The tack on was a quality assurance, and it just wasn't taken seriously enough. 2 years previously, promised to improve their system, they didn't, and when the auditors come back, they hadn't done it, they weren't in a happy place. So basically, the councillors agreed, and at that stage gave us approval for another 5-star, which was fine to have approved 5-star. Getting 5-star in Queenstown is like trying to find water in the desert. So that, but first thing that we actually did was, and this is what leads leading to here, is it's got a quality assurance manager, and that just takes the dedicated role to make sure all our ducks are in a row every time we get audited. And the result of that was QRDC had to going from a 2-year audit down to a 1-year audit, which means you're on a watch list. And unfortunately, the media got a hold of it and they made it really worse than it was. So that's another position you don't want really getting a hold of stuff when things aren't going around accreditation very well. And so that resulted in some very hard work to get it up and running, but it's sort of, it just showed, I think we're in a very similar situation. CODC here, we were just being cleared our 7 general non-compliances. We've gone from a 2-year audit down to a 1-year audit, which means that they're watching us very carefully, and another year they're back in July, and if we're not fronting up and doing everything we're supposed to do, that's not going to look good, and I'll be very worried about the position that we would be in.
Any questions?
When are you advertising?
Yeah, and look, and if we continue to grow at 12.6% over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And all the pressure comes on resource consents, building consents across the whole team, environmental health. It is a real touch point with the community, and we see it all the time when we work with developers and that sort of stuff.
But that's one
Yeah.
of the common things that you get told of at the
Yes.
outside of the pitch or wherever you are in the supermarket. Oh, maybe you're my resource consent.
And that was what came through in that residents
Yep.
survey as well, was the, just the timing, and there's only so many hours in the day,
I
so.
would have thought we would have this is something this is a must do.
And we're a growth council. So
Yeah.
our workload's going.
You don't see people get on it.
Great.
Just major decisions.
Yeah.
We're done. Yeah, really good steer. And we are on track, guys. Thank you very much, Lee and team. You are doing great work. We really appreciate you. We will take a quick lunch break and be back at 1 o'clock. You will be back at